What movie did you start watching then said, "F this, I'm not finishing this"? Every pornographic movie I ever started. I was interested. Interested. Really interested. Then suddenly I lost all interest. And felt nothing but shame and self-disgust. I'd feel like that dude from Limitless if I could always operate with 100% peak post-nut clarity. Serious question. Why do people always say this? It's a super common stand-up gag to regret your life choices after masturbating. I've never felt bad after spanking it. Is there some clan of guilty shamers out there? It's just a wank, people. When I'm done, I just go well time to clean up, I feel better. Then I close 10 tabs and snuggle my blanket in bed. If you've never hung your head in shame after a wank, then you haven't gone far enough down the rabbit hole of depravity that porn has to offer. Have you never nuttered to something and then immediately realized how gross what you're watching is? No, never. If it's gross to me then it won't turn me on and, therefore, I won't have any interest in nutting to it. Congratulations, you don't have a porn addiction. Probably. The come down just sucks. At best, afterwards I'll feel like I've wasted my time or I'll be annoyed at the cleanup I have to do now. At worst, I'll be depressed for an hour or so afterwards for no real reason. Thank you. I asked this question in another thread a few days ago and didn't get an answer. I guess it's not what you do, but what you do to get it done, as per the answers below. Here. Postcoital tristesse, PCT, is the feeling of sadness, anxiety, agitation or aggression after sexual intercourse, mostly in males. Its name comes from New Latin postcoitalus and French tristesse, literally sadness. Many people with PCT may exhibit strong feelings of anxiety lasting from 5 minutes to 2 hours after coitus. The phenomenon was first mentioned by the Greek Dr. Galen, who wrote that every animal is sad after coitus, except the human female and the rooster. The philosopher Baruch Spinoza, in his Tractatus de Intellectus Emendation, wrote, "For as far as sensual pleasure is concerned, the mind is so caught up in it, as if at peace in a true good, that it is quite prevented from thinking of anything else. But after the enjoyment of sensual pleasure is past, the greatest sadness follows. If this does not completely engross, still it thoroughly confuses and dulls the mind." One study reported that among a sample of 1.208 male participants, 40% of them had experienced PCT at least once in their lifetime, and 20% reported experiencing PCT in the 4 weeks preceding the study. This study also reports that 3 to 4% of the sample experienced PCT symptoms on a regular basis. According to the same study, PCT among males is associated with current psychological distress, sexual abuse during childhood, and with several sexual dysfunctions. With respect to symptoms in women, one study involved an epidemiological survey of postcoital psychological symptoms in a United Kingdom population sample of female twins. It found that 3.7% of women reported suffering from recent PCT and 7.7% suffering PCT for a long time. Another study reported that almost half of female university students reported PCT symptoms at least once in their lifetime. The study also reported that there appeared to be no correlation between PCT and intimacy in close relationships. Oh, man. This is really disheartening. It took a lot to work through my past to get to where I am, and to see that men suffer this feeling regularly, just as a natural state, is really messed up. Not being educated, or not knowing the world around you, does suck. It causes extreme issues personally and in relationships. Blame the fact no one felt you deserved to know about sex ed, don't blame yourself. Also, and this is personal speculation, I feel like there would be an evolutionary benefit. If you subconsciously wanted the girl you just banged it to get the F out of your house, it would increase the chances that you would reproduce with a different set of DNA, increasing the overall reproduction and distribution of genetics. Were you raised religiously? Most religions teach children that masturbating is bad, sinful, and shameful. Can confirm. I grew up Mormon and for 3 or 4 years, I felt intense shame after masturbating. It's probably some weird kinky shit. It's called postcoital tristesse and is a real thing regardless of porn. It is, but as that article points out, it's not something that everyone experiences. This is purely anecdotal, but I think it has a lot to do with the context of the orgasm. Compare having sex with a partner with whom you're deeply in love versus with someone you just met and won't see again, for example. In the case of porn, I think it stands to reason that if you're guilty about nutting to it, for example because you were raised to think that sex, other than with your spouse for the purposes of procreation, is wrong, you're more likely to feel shitty afterwards than if you're not at all guilty about it, for example because you were raised in a sex-positive household and you live in a country that doesn't have any cultural sex hangups. You're spot on. Sex with my ex would often end with me feeling like shit. Generally just an awful time that would leave me feeling anxious when I started feeling horny again. My new partner I've been seeing for a few months on the other hand is wonderful, and each time we've had sex has left me immensely satisfied with no depression or anxiety after we finish. Well, naturally, it was implied that a physiological response is not guaranteed across the entire of humanity. When I first got my hands on a porno, in the mid-90s, right when I turned 18, so an actual physical VHS tape, I mentally made up a bunch of weird rules that had to be followed because it was required you watch pornos that way. No skipping over the non-sex scenes was the big one. When I was a kid very young adult I tended to make up weird rules out of nothing and then force myself to adhere to them, thinking everyone did it that way so I had to, too. It was really strange. Anyway, the point is, I watched that entire thing from start to end because I had to, per my made-up rules that I was somehow convinced was the proper way to do it. I was a really dumb kid. Sounds to me like a way to gain control over a situation in which you felt insecure. Stupid rules and rigidity bring some order into a chaotic world, even if it's just subjective. Damn Freud, just laid this boy out on your couch in front of everyone. Funky sexy music starts. I would watch this. The movie that finishes you. You never find out if he fixes the cable. Hey man, it's F2020. Sometimes she's the one fixing the cable. Always the dude laying pipe though. Dude, it's F2020. Sometimes the chick is the one laying pipe. About 75% of the movies that I start watching on Netflix. Especially the ones that have multiple big name actors, but you've never heard of the movie. Serious red flag. It's coming in winter or fall 23. A picture we know that you're waiting to see. Created by Netflix, the voiceover said. Concerning the tale of a flag. And it's red. Red flag. Rad flag. So true, especially the amount of Netflix original movies they're just making without any substance at all. They are mostly so freaking bad that I end up watching old movies that I loved most of the time. There was a time when the made by Netflix drew my attention. Nowadays the absence of it does that. I think they've always done a better job with TV than movies. Films have far more highs and lows. I feel like they don't know how to edit a movie somehow. I envy people who have the ability to walk away from bad movies. I just gotta finish even when they're shit. I'm like that with books. I finished 700 plus page books that I started hating on page 97. Do not know why I'm like this. Wish I could just fling it across the room and walk away, but no. I'm like this with jigsaw puzzles. I just finished a puzzle that sat on the table for about 2 months. Normally, a puzzle takes me about 4 days. I hated the thing but kept going and was pissed the whole time. Ooh, I puzzle too. Used to collect big 3,000 to 5,000 Ravensburger painting puzzles. There's a several thousand piece puzzle of a city in northern Norway in my house that I know is lacking at least one piece. It bothers me in my soul. Thinking of trying out Yu Osaka ones now that my eyes are bad. Can probably do those on feel, but they cost. Wow, 3,000 to 5,000 pieces. That's insane. I saw one of those displayed in a Games by James store. The owner had put it together, sealed it and mounted it on the wall. I can't even imagine. I'm a bit of a wimp. I only do 1,000 piece puzzles. I usually go for the ones with many colors and textures to keep it fun. I would not be inclined to do one, for example a bunch of marbles, tons of sky or trees, etc., because they are too hard. Those types of puzzles ruin my fun. Lol. I finished Van Gogh's Bedroom from Maduka a few years ago. That's 5,000 pieces of slowly losing your sanity to the floorboards. It took me about 3 weeks, and after it was done I took a picture for proof and immediately scooped that evil fare back in the box. It lives in my basement. Ravensburger puzzles irrationally piss me off. Not because I dislike the puzzles, but because I scout thrift shops for their board games and those puzzles fake me out all the damn time. They do look like great puzzles, but I'm cheap and not willing to risk my money on an open thrifted puzzle or patiently count out 10,000 pieces in the furniture section. They will send you missing pieces. Totally worth a buy if you find a big one. Mean Girls 2. We'll just pretend like that movie never existed. It bothered me because the girls weren't even bullies in that one like the first. They just did straight up crimes they could have gotten arrested for. The only memory I have of it was that they all looked about 12, no idea of the real ages they were supposed to be, but they were making fun of the main girl for being a virgin. None of them looked or acted old enough to know about sex. The only memory I have of it is that the main girl was not like other girls because she did woodtech or something. Do I look like a regular girl to you? Yeah, that's when I turned it off. She also wore a leather jacket and rode a motorbike, which as we all know makes her cool and relatable. Haha, reminds me of the chicken Bumblebee. I don't think I've ever watched another movie where I would be perfectly content, no, happy even, if the main character was just not there. Like at all. She had absolutely no personality and contributed like nothing to the film other than filling time. The women who played the main characters were between 18 to 22 at filming. You're just used to 25-year-olds playing high school kids probably. Riverdale comes to mind. Just as bad as Grease. People in their late 20s playing 16-year-olds. 50 Shades of Grey. I was out as soon as she walked into Christian S' office and tripped over nothing. Cause, you know, she's just so quirky and clumsy. I didn't see the movie, but I tried to read the book. Product. Don't. It's a shame that that pulp is what sort of mainstream BDSM in our generation. I would have hoped something better would have had the honor. I highly recommend reading the Jenny Trout Reads 50 Shades series of blog posts. Jenny Trout is an author, and she read through all the 50 Shades books chapter by chapter and rip them to shreds, but in an informed way. It's a very funny read info. Here's chapter 1. Go Toddy link. It will give you the experience of reading the book without really having to read it. Much like videotaping a friend getting stitches gives you the experience, but not the pain and hassle of cutting your own finger with a razor blade because you're too lazy to get up and get the scissors to open the USB drive packaging. Ugh. I felt that. Edit. She signs in, gets a visitor's pass, and heads upstairs to the second steel and glass and sandstone and steel, and more glass and mahogany and red and yellow and pink and brown and scarlet and black and ochre and peach and ruby and olive and violet and fawn and violet and gold and chocolate and mauve and cream and crimson and silver and rose and azure and lemon and russet and gray and purple and white and pink and orange and blue lobby. I wish I could tell you that I just used more adjectives and words than James did to describe this sequence of events. I am many things, but I am not a liar. I giggled. Thanks for the link. This is pretty entertaining. Edit 2. So young and attractive, very attractive. He's tall, dressed in a fine gray suit, white shirt, and black tie with unruly dark copper-colored hair and intense bright gray eyes that regard me shrewdly. That is one hell of a tie. I'm going to have to ask someone, please, look into the kindness and the goodness of your soul, and Photoshop me a picture of a black tie with Robert Pattinson's hair and eyes stuck on it, gazing at me shrewdly. F. I'm dead. Edit 3. A reader actually delivered. All hail the internet. Fair warning that I've read through most of her chapter summaries, and there's a point where poor Jenny becomes sad and defeated because she's realizing the hype isn't going away, and that this abusive relationship is still lauded as a love story of our generation. It's a great read, but after a while it goes from light and funny to this is what's wrong with our society, and nothing is changing. So, basically, her 50 Shades journey is a foreshadowing of humanity's unfolding disillusionment with itself. I have a feeling someone out there could earn a PhD by writing a dissertation on this, if no one has done so yet. Edit. I see what you mean, Tobin Wiggler. Sadly, I'm also starting to think that the plot of Idiocracy is actually a dire prophecy, and this book might be the keystone in the foundation of the downfall of the human race. And she wrote that no later than the end of her post for chapter 2. When we tell our post-apocalyptic children about the downfall of humanity, now we know where to start. A good alternative, for those who aren't already familiar, is the My Dad Wrote a Porno podcast, which quickly becomes a fond celebration of the subject work's ridiculous badness. Easier when something so bad it's good and everybody sees it that way, rather than some being enthralled by a book with no redeeming qualities whatsoever. Edit. I think it can also take the edge off of social isolation in the current situation, as it's almost like having 3 or 4 when they have a guest, very funny British friends hanging out and having a great time in the next room while one makes dinner or folds laundry, etc. If you want an equally entertaining video comparison, I highly recommend Folding Ideas Critique. I watched all 3 of his videos on the 50 Shades series again yesterday and was going to suggest it as well when I saw this. He did a wonderful job explaining so much that was wrong with the series. Yes, I love Folding Ideas. His Suicide Squad in the art of editing video is also must watch. The Emoji Movie. It was almost a parody of every CGI kids movie. My son is autistic and gets super fixated on random things for periods of time, ripping paper, compass directions, weather, power lines, etc. He watched the Emoji Movie on Netflix one day and become obsessed with drawing images. I had to watch this pile of garbage movie every day for like 3 months. Thank goodness he moved on eventually, lol. I'm lucky, my son chose Mona to fixate on. It's a lovely film and I'm not sick of it yet, 1000 viewings later. If he'd picked something like Emoji Movie, kudos to you for your patience. I miss my son's Mona fixation. Even Minions was pretty okay. He's now fixated on movie end credits. Like just the last minute that displays logos of Dolby Atmos, MPAA, etc. Why do people even put it on YouTube? Why? Because kids like your son and my cousin, high functioning but very obsessive, need to talk endlessly about logos and trademarks, lol. I never knew how many companies were subtly redesigning logos until he started pointing it out. Not as uninteresting as you might think. Oh god, yeah, that was torture. I took my daughter to see it at the flicks. I wish I could sleep during film. I wanted to sell it if my eyelids closed. Honest question, did your daughter like it? She bloody loved it. Even at 6 I question her taste. Must be her father's genes. I prefer the old school way of kids movie. Giving your kid nightmares on how Bambi dies. Edit. Sorry, Bambi's mom dies. Watership Down. That film is basically bunnies forgot to look their drugs up on Arrowhead and had a meltingly bad trip. You know your F when even your melt is melting during your trip. Better than having your grilled cheese melting during your trip. I'm so tired of people mixing up melts with grilled cheeses. Oh. Someone else here who was traumatized by Watership Down. Excellent. Traumatized is right. Rabbits still creep me out. BC of Watership Down. I made this mistake of reading the book as a kid in 3rd to 4th grade. I found it at my grandma's and I was bored, so picked it up and then just couldn't stop reading it. It quiet, but for some reason I also ended up watching the movie a few weeks later. I don't know which was worse, reading detailed descriptions about the rabbits panicking and crushing each other as they suffocated trying to escape, or watching it. Edit. Just looked it up on and found out the author wrote the book based on stories he'd make up and tell his daughters on long car trips. Apparently they loved the stories so much they begged him to write the book. What the F, kids? Dude, I hear you. Scenes from that book still stick with me practically word for word 30 plus years after reading it. Between Watership Down and The Secret of Nim, my psyche was well and truly scarred. Oh f yeah, Nim. Quotes from those two just like to float up and traumatize me when I'm in the bath, going to work, drifting off at night. Grim. Oh my god, Nim. I genuinely think I had repressed that. Forgot about Nim, another freaking intense movie 5-year-old me was not prepared for. He wrote one about 2 dogs that escape a testing lab. I remember nothing more about it, except that it was less traumatic than Watership Down. No. It's more traumatic. Plague Dog starts with a dog in a swim tank, swimming until he passes out, and they fish him out by the collar. They made a cartoon movie about it too. Yay. Sad smiley. I loved Watership Down so much as a child, the book and the film. That makes 2 of us, I guess. It was one of my favorite childhood movies, and I still don't understand how it traumatized so many people. It's a classic epic journey tale as far as I'm concerned. I'm really surprised by all these people who watched Watership Down as children. Even more surprised by those who enjoyed it. Traumatized me in my 20s, and I really enjoy horror and disturbing literature. The fact that it was bunnies was what did it. I've always empathized with animals more than humans, and I was completely obsessed with bunnies as a little kid. So Watership Down was like a nightmare hellscape version of my childhood memories. The book is extremely well written, but I couldn't finish it. My ex loved it and insisted we watch the movie. I'm one of those people who cries maybe once a year, and I cried like a bitch through that entire F movie. At least they were free at the end. Plague Dogs was far more traumatizing. Saw this at age 10. This movie was my real first taste of existential angst. It was the first time I understood the dilemma of escaping persecution and death for being different at the hand of others. Watership Down is animated, but it is not for kids. The book is like 400 pages long, so I don't know how someone was like, hey look, this novel is clearly for adults, but let's make it into a movie and market it for kids. Because we're animating bunnies. When I was 10 and 11, a few of my good friends were really into the Watership Down books. I don't think I made it through the first one, and definitely didn't get to the second one, and I was an avid reader. My friends were unusual, both most likely geniuses, at least based on test scores and such. But yeah, I remember feeling not okay about it. I was a really sensitive kid and somehow watched Silence of the Lambs with another friend and his older brother at about 12 or 13, and I was super disturbed. Up there with The Little Mermaid when I was like 2 or 3, still never finished it after Ursula came out. I was hoping for a feel-good goofy movie and saw Downsizing while browsing Hulu. After reading the description, I assumed it'd be something like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids and went for it. It was nothing like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Sad smiley. In fact, it's 2 bad movies combined in a single script. One good concept, spitrested by sweaty Hollywood executives who didn't get it with starving screenwriters collecting the bell suite. The original script was a lot more interesting weird. I kid you not, there's a scene where a corrupt politician is talking about how he loves shrunken prostitute women doing tiny shits on his chest. Oh come on, that had some great lines in it. Here you can be very rich, unless you don't have any money. Then you're just small. Delivered by carefree playboy Christoph Waltz in a moment of detached reflection. It has Christoph Waltz. That's a bingo. Good quotes don't make a movie good. A good story makes a movie good. Downsizing's story was all over the place. I have to say I might be in the minority, but I loved it. I particularly loved the direction it takes with the Vietnamese character. You're insane. That was the most random tangent they could have taken with the movie. The scene when Matt Damon is seductively rubbing her nub was too much for me, man. Years back, I used to love the no-effort parody movies like Epic Movie, Scary Movie, Superhero Movie, Meet the Spartans, etc. Until I watched Scary Movie 5. When 5 came out, I couldn't see it immediately at the time, so I forgot about it and rented it years later. When watching it, I realized none of the jokes were funny because they all relied on referencing and parodying the horror movies of that time, which were no longer relevant. It was a slog and I turned it off and returned it halfway through. This is the first time I've heard someone say they enjoyed Epic Movie. I was still a child when that one came out, and honestly, I thought it was goddamn hilarious. Epic Movie put me in stitches. Today, you'd probably have to pay me to watch it. Things were funnier as a kid. Edit. F all of you for making my highest rated comment about Epic Movie. The Robin Hood movie from a year or so back. The bad guys have machine gun crossbows. It's bizarre. Edit. So this comment got a bit more attention than I was expecting. For anyone that hasn't seen it and is curious, the first scene has Robin Hood in the Crusades, where the Crusaders wear modern gear and flak jackets, and they hut around a bombed out city, clearing houses with longbows half drawn at the shoulder like they're Spec Ops dudes, but they get pinned down by an automatic ballista that's basically a machine gun nest, but it's okay because they fire a flare arrow over it, which calls in an airstrike from some nearby trebuchets. I didn't hate this as much as some of the people replying, but the whole thing was so goofy and stupid that I couldn't be bothered finishing it. It doesn't even pretend to be set in the past, it has modern equivalents for like everything. Warfare, politics, dress, etc. is all entirely modern. There's bloody Antifa versus riot cops. That movie bugged me so much. When Robin shot arrows, the way it was filmed made it seem like he was supposed to be shooting a gun. You mean like in the beginning where they're walking around with half-drawn bows like they're guns going through a house in Baghdad? Since when do archers go close quarters anyway? This movie didn't even have swords, lol, they use bows point blank. Honestly, me and the boys love to watch this movie when we drink. It's a fucking riot. There's a crossbow bazooka type thing, an RPG crossbow that blows up a carriage in a high-speed chase. The whole opening scene feels like medieval Black Hawk Down. For us, it's one of those weird and absurd movies that is so bad it's good, and I truly do love it. This sounds like an amazing bad movie night movie. This whole thread is basically filling my Netflix queue. Okay, now I want to watch this insanity. Can't be worse than Battlefield Earth. I felt my brain cells dying just reading that. It gave me a chainmail rigid penis in my pant.